Hi everyone. Here, wait. There we go. Hi. We are going to be starting soon. So let me push this out on the social fronts, and we will go ahead and draw this dragon plush. And with me today is Deandra. She will be helping kind of direct the comment traffic as well as answer a few herself. And we do this every Wednesday. And usually, today I was pretty good about it. I posted about 2 or 3 hours beforehand, where normally it's about an hour, but I'll try to stick to more of a 3-hour beforehand so it gives you guys more time to plan if you want to watch it or not. I think we're good. Okay. All right, so we are ready. Ready?
Yep.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Von Rieden with DeAndrePop at ConceptCookie.com, and today we will be doing a live stream on how to do a plush dragon. It was requested on how to do a cute dragon last week, and I thought I wanted to take it into something a little more in-depth, so I wanted to work with plush because then you work with different fabrics. So on the dragon itself, I have different areas that we can work on, and I even had to go through my old Beanie Baby stash, and I want to recreate 3 different kinds of textures. So I'm looking for, I don't know how well you can see this on the stream, but sort of this metallic foil type material, the obvious just felt or basic fabric, and I'm going to show you guys how to get that look of like the stitching too. So even on like the areas of the cracks, I want to show you guys how you can just do a simple lighting technique and you'll recreate it pretty easily. So with that, I want to go ahead and switch to my canvas so we can go ahead and start here. Alright, so here's our little dragon. He's kind of a mix of like a Spyro the Dragon and a Sackboy from Little Big Planet. And what we're going to be doing is starting off with a base coat. So I just did a simple shading on it on top, so I'm just going to hide those layers. So here's our simple sketch. And pretty much I'm going to be doing this the way I do all my stuff that I start with line art first. So I'm going to make a new layer underneath of this. Let's go ahead and make him red, since that's my favorite color. And I think I'm going to be working in my chalk brush today. So, oops, that's my eraser tool. So I'm going to be working in my chalk brush today. So I usually work from my darks to my lights. So I'll lay out a little palette on the side here so you guys can kind of see what colors I'm choosing.
Somebody says the quality is quite bad.
Oh, are you guys not able to see it as well? Well, if it was because of the camera, that was because I'm assuming it's my little iMac camera, but hopefully you guys can see the stream all right. Use my blue as my highlight. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is let's lay down a base coat. And I'm going to be using the technique that I used in my soft edge brush tutorial, where pretty much you lay it out pretty thick, not worrying about if it's going over the borders. And then on another layer, let's go ahead and build up our second coat. And you know what, before I even do that though, you can see these different lines that are supposed to represent like the sewing lines. Oops, why do I keep choosing my eraser? There we go. So there's lines that indicate like where the fabric would have to be stitched together on the inside of the, I'm going to call it a Beanie Baby even, or no, I shouldn't really, inside of the plushie. So you're going to see these little stitch lines on the outside. But if you kind of shade them correctly, you can really emphasize the line, and you can almost erase the line art layer after you're done with this. So pretty much the trick that I use is on one side of the line, really build up a heavy coat of the color, and then leave the other side, so don't like go on this side too and do the same thing. Leave the other side more in that contrast with that dark red. And we'll first obviously pick a light direction. I'm going from upper left, the typical lighting direction that I almost always do, and kind of work with that. So let me show you in just a second. So like from a side view, it almost is like a crack, a little crevice. And if the light was coming from this direction, it'd be very much apparent here, but not so much there, because the light would be hitting near the top here and then kind of fading into a shadow right there.
Can you download the chalk brush from the site?
Yes, so the chalk brush it's actually one of the basic ones that come with Photoshop, but I included it in the basic brush pack that you can also download on Concept Cookie. So yes, that is free and available for you guys. Alright, so why don't I hide that line art layer? And you can see, actually, that crack is a little too, oops, a little too bold. And but I'm going to do my best not to zoom in at all with this piece, because I really want you guys to understand that you don't need to be zooming in to do detail stuff, and oftentimes that'll just be a waste of time. And especially if you are on the job and your time is kind of very valuable, you want to be sure you're using it to the best of your ability. Alright, now let's see what that looks like. Oh, did I just draw on the line art layer? Oh, that happens too. Sometimes you'll work on the wrong layer accidentally, then you got to go back and erase it. Especially if you're working for a client, you really want to make sure that your layers are organized and that you're able to kind of showcase what each layer is. So usually naming them helps out a bunch too. And like I said, we will have the Q&A up on the side at all times. So if you have any questions, even if it's not related to what I'm working on directly, just feel free to ask, and we will make sure to get to you. And this is also kind of inspired, I would assume, from the new How to Train Your Dragons 2 movie, which the artist, is it Chris Sanders?
Well, he worked on the first movie. I'm not sure if he did on the second one.
Because this kind of has that design where it's a very lunky, big head, big forehead. He's a great artist to kind of look to for this kind of stuff. Alright, now let's see what it looks like without the line. So it's still pretty too heavy for me. Let me go ahead. Just a soft coating over. That might be a little more what I'm looking towards. And it'll get better once I add in the different layers. Now I'm going to do this everywhere. So you got to imagine that these little cracks or little indentations kind of indicate there's a hump. So even with this forehead, it's divided in half with this line right here. So I'm going to kind of pill shade up to it, but then as soon as the new area starts, I'm going to make it really heavy. Something like that. And I'm also taking into account, I don't have to go crazy with it, but these little, I don't know what you want to call them, head spikes, they're going to be casting a little shadow depending on how intense the light situation is here. But just for that extra touch, I want to add in the shadow as well. And then I want to be constantly flipping my image as much as I can. You don't want to be doing it like every 10 seconds, but once every 3 to 5 minutes, I would say, is recommended. Minimal. Don't be catching yourself where it's like an hour into it, then you flip it and you regret it, because it literally is just one keyboard shortcut and you can just keep working.
It's harder to fix if you wait too long, too.
Yeah.
So, the more often, the better.
I almost think I want to make this bottom half like a darker red. I think I'm going to do that. And this is one of those like quick fixes you can do. Oops. So I'm just going to grab my line art color, which is just pure black. And now I say all the time, don't use pure blacks or pure whites, but I'm going to hide the line art layer in the end. So this is just so I can really see the contrast between what I'm doing here. And I also try to make it so that it makes sense. So something like this, you definitely want to be thinking the functionality. So like, why would the stitch lines be here? And that's kind of why I brought Beanie Babies up for reference, because just having that visual reference right in front of you, or even if you Google image, like you don't have to get real life references, but I often find real life references are the best because then you can turn it at any angle, you can light it however you want. Where a Google image, you're kind of limited to what is already given to you. You're working down the body. So now here's a good instance of where I kind of have a gradient going down the body here, but then the top of the leg, since I think it would be kind of directed more or angled more toward the light, I would give it more of that color, and that would separate the two without adding any line art. So little things like that, just be constantly thinking of just to add more of that shading technique to your piece. Oops. And then the tail back there.
Benedict asks, why did you start drawing?
Why did I start drawing? Probably because my mom wanted me to pass the time for a while, I'm assuming, when I was little. But I think it became more of a personal thing where it gave me something to do, but I also really enjoyed it. So I just kept drawing, and I never stopped. So it just kept progressing until I hit high school. And, well, then again, I kind of knew I wanted to do something with drawing when I was in grade school. I would say about 5th grade, I was kind of like, yeah, this is exactly what I really want to do. I've been just with that mindset for all my life, and now I'm here doing this live stream with you guys. And that's why I don't think it's ridiculous to really listen to kids when they say what they want to be when they grow up, because sometimes they are serious of, like, if that's something that really interests them, you shouldn't just blow it off. And my parents had no idea what to do with me because neither of them are art related, so they tried their best, but they really have no idea. And I think it was good for me to kind of have to be able to explore what I want on my own. But I do think it helps growing up with an artistic mindset in mind. I think we talked about this a little last week, where sometimes it's hard to get into art when you are older, and this has to do all with like the visual libraries, everything. And that's why I usually see the artists that start younger oftentimes are the ones that know what they're doing, or it's easier for them to create or catch on to different techniques. Alright, this first color seems to be kind of done. So if I turn that layer on and off, you can kind of see what we got going on here. And now that's only with one value shade. So right now, all used is this color. So there's only 2 colors used in the entire piece. So now let's go ahead and use this color for layer 3. So pretty much I'm looking at where I shaded the initial round of red, and then I'm going to be pillow shading, but I'm going to be doing it slightly more concentrated. This is a very bright orange. I almost think I need to make it a tad more red. Even more so. Let's go with this. Because the fabric that I'm trying to recreate here, I want it to still read as a red, where that other color pushed it more toward an orange. And the reason I wanted to use the chalk brush is because it does leave that little bit of texture behind. And if you look at like a plush close up, it has those little fibers of the fabric that catches the light, and sometimes in different directions. So I'm trying to recreate that on a major scale without having to go in and like individually detail each fiber. Then I also have my brush set as the chalk brush, so that if I go in and erase some areas, I'm not leaving a hard edge behind. Flip it.
What would you say is an easy way to transition from traditional art to digital?
The easiest way to transition from traditional to digital.
They said, my brother is giving me his tablet next month, and I'd like to be able to prepare myself so I can get into drawing with it right away.
Honestly, just kind of forcing it, and you might trip over yourself a little bit when learning it. I remember when I first got my tablet, I thought it was going to be the best thing, and the first 3 months were kind of hell. Like, it was awful. I remember being like, oh, I can't do this. I'll never be able to be a digital artist because I can't figure out this tablet situation. And it does take time, so you got to really stick with it and just know that it'll be frustrating for a little while until you kind of grasp the idea of, well, one, you not only have to learn how to use the the tablet, but you have to get used to whatever software you're using. So even Photoshop can be pretty daunting, especially at first sight. So I think if you can just stick with it and don't try to overdo it. So try just working with basic things like learning how to shade a sphere correctly, learning how colors blend together, how the different brushes work. And once you kind of learn the basics, then you can kind of pick up on the more advanced techniques. But that's why I say don't overkill it right away. Like don't like I'm going to create a full illustration piece, because I think that's what will discourage you more than anything.
I don't think there's any real way to prepare without just like practicing on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, once you get it, but it helps if you have like a good understanding of how to draw in the first place. Like if you're well versed in traditional, then when you get to digital, you just have to learn how to use the program. You don't actually have to learn how to draw at the same time, because that's really hard.
That's even more daunting.
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see, even though it looks very subtle right now, you can see when I turn that layer on and off, the difference that that's making. It's really giving this plush more roundness, more value to it. And the reason for this arm right here, I'm only shading up to here because this is a cast shadow from the head, because I'm really imagining the lighting and how it's working here, and even with this leg here. But here's where most people make the mistake of how to add shadows. So this right here, for the longest time I would like pull a multiply layer and then probably lay out a color right here and make it even darker. But you want to remember that multiply layer or shadows don't add value. There is just no lighting to create value from, which kind of sounds confusing, but just know that you don't have to add values to shadows. They'll kind of add it they add it themselves by not adding value. So I don't want to try to confuse you guys, but just know that when you're working with shadows, don't try to intensify it, because if you leave it more subtle, it'll actually look and read more clear as a realistic shadow would. Or here's another good example with like the tail back here. You might have the instinct of wanting to separate the tail from the body, so making it darker. But in reality, if the light is coming from overhead, there's nothing blocking the light from getting to the edge of this tail, because the tail would probably go somewhere on the back here. So the lighting would be probably pretty intense up until near the back. Shadow would be up there. So I'm not going to darken this area here. A lot of the times, like during this stage, it's just thinking about lighting and where the light would be falling upon. And once you have a really good grasp of lighting, it'll make digital art so much easier, just art in general, to be honest. Okay, so we're going to do one more red layer, and then we're going to move on to the other parts of the dragon. So like I want to do like the button and the cheek area, the horns, because that's going to be in a different color. So with this, even looking at my beanies right now, they don't really have any type of a highlight on it. If anything, it's more of a textured highlight where there's not a concentrated area, it's more spread out. So I'm just going to give it a slight spread out look and hopefully just give the piece a little more value. And I think I'm working too saturated. I'm going to pull it down. Let's try here. So this is the color I'm working with right now. And I guess this is a good time. I wanted to kind of announce that I'm currently planning to have a workshop in the fall, if anyone would be interested. We wanted me to do one earlier this year, but I think just due to time constraints, we weren't able to do so. But coming this fall, I think I want to do a full-blown workshop where I would take about 20 to 30 students, and for 8 to 10 weeks, it would just be a very in-depth course. But the thing I'm trying to think about is, do I want it to be for more intermediate users, or should it be more for beginners and work from there? And I'm leaning more toward the beginner one, just like for people that really want to pick up digital art in general. So if you're interested, I mean, keep that in the back of your mind, because we'll probably be announcing it in August for the full details, because right now I'm getting ready to record and prep all that stuff for it, because I really wanted to make it a nice in-depth course where it doesn't just feel like I was forcing it. I really want to feel like I was given enough time to think it through, and yeah, so I'm just kind of excited for that. And right now, if you can kind of tell, I'm adding in these little indentation lines where it's like subtle wrinkles. And I'm doing that just to give it more of that plush look. And this is what will separate it from it looking from like a real cartoon dragonish to something that's more toy-like. Yeah.
Working really well.
I hope so. So you can see when that layer is turned on and off. It's just a subtle difference, but it definitely adds a little more.
Our next question is, I get the basic thoughts of how to draw shadows, but it always gets over my experience when I have half transparent things, or multiple light sources. Any tips?
I wish I had something in this picture to give you an example of. But things that are like half transparent, those are almost the most fun to draw. You want to draw it like solid, like let's say this wing, for example. So even though this wing probably wouldn't be transparent because I'm trying to do more of a plush, what I would probably do, there's two ways I would probably do this. I would either make it look really nice, and imagine this looked really nice, and then lower the layer's opacity and then do some like highlighting over that so you can see the background behind it. So let's say I had like, oops. That's really intense. So something where like you can see through the wing, even that's still pretty intense. Something like that, that feels better. Where it feels more transparent. So that's one way I would go about doing it. Or the other way would be making it solid like this again, but then using my eraser tool and just slightly erasing what you already have. And this is just two ways of many. Like there's many, many, many different ways you can do it. So this is just one example of how to do something transparent. And this works for like frosted glass or like a cold window. Anything that you can kind of see through and the edges have more of that solid basing to it. So that would be my recommendation for that. But don't get discouraged. A lot of the time it's just figuring out the right technique or just really analyzing it and trying to figure out in your mind, okay, how can I recreate this? And that's a lot of what digital art is in general. It's just being able to figure out, okay, how do I recreate this? And even right now, sometimes my mind will jump. Like here, I kind of want to add in, you know how sometimes stitching will give those tight wrinkles near the edge? I want to just give a subtle look to that. And I think this might be more for the final detailing stage. I think I'm jumping the gun on that just a tad. But I guess I can come back to that. Let's get back to doing more of the base stuff. So right now, let's get to doing the horns, I want to say. I think the horns, I want to do it as this crazy fabric. And for this, I'm going to go ahead.
Shiny?
What is this called? It's like a metal, it's like, not a metal, it's like a foil.
I'm not quite sure here.
So pretty much for this is a good example of where I'm going to get Google Images. Let's see here. And I'm going to grab and drop it into here. And then close this over here. Okay, so these are two of the Dragon Beanie Babies. I have both of them in front of me, but since you guys can't see it. So what I'm trying to recreate, and this actually might be quite the challenge, since I've never done this before. So let's erase Dragon on the left. So I'm trying to create the wing structure seen here. So it has this foil-like shiny reflective surface. So a lot of the times I'll pull it up an image like this, but I'm not going to just lay it over and copy it. What I'm going to do is color pick from it and also really look at how the different light transitions on it and how it gives that appearance. Try to recreate it to the best of my ability. So initially, what I can see is the shadows seem to have more of this red hue to it, where the highlights have more of this yellow-green hue to it. So let's go ahead and lay those down. And then also, in half shadows, we have more of this purple color. So this could either turn out really great, or this might look like a disaster. So let's go ahead and give it our best shot at first. And this is a good learning experience. So like for me, I've never done something like this. So I'm looking at it and trying to analyze it to the best of my ability and think, how can I recreate this on my own image? And I'm telling you, that really is like 90% of digital art. Because then the other 10% is just doing it. Or like knowing what tools can give you that. But the actual problem solving process is most of what people I think struggle with in digital art. Someone's asking, I draw manga a lot. I feel stuck to the manga drawing style. Do you have any advices on that? So I'm sure you might have heard a lot of professional artists kind of dig on that kind of style, and it's not because they are disinterested or they think it's like cheap, but it doesn't help you learn accurate, really anything, and it's the style that you're more or less mimicking. So you want to sometimes like the best manga artists are oftentimes like really, really skilled in realism, which I think a lot of people don't know. And once you learn the foundations and the basics, then doing a style is actually really easy. But if you learn how to do the style first, then it's really hard to learn the fundamentals. So don't work backwards, try to work forwards.
If you start with such a like heavily influenced style like that, it's hard to do anything but that. So, but if you have your like foundation set and you can draw from life, you can go in any direction. Like your options aren't limited.
Yeah.
So probably the best suggestion would be to go take a figure drawing class, or like just do like still lifes, like set up, draw your friends, like anything, you know. But get those like realistic proportions down, and then once you like, you know, that saying that's like you have to know the rules before you can break them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to exaggerate proportions, like you can only, the best way to do that is to know what they are in the first place.
Yeah.
We have a comment that says, I live too far away to take your course or workshop.
Oh, it's going to be online. So even if you're in China or Australia, you'll be fine. Although we have talked about doing a live session before, but considering I don't think many people are in Wisconsin, in the United States either, really, it would make more sense if we did more of a online experience. But I still want to have it feel like the students feel catered to. So I'm definitely going to give personal one-on-one time every week, really review their assignments, and make it so that it is like an art school experience without actually physically being near each other. Because that was my favorite part about art school, was just meeting all these new artists that were just as motivated and passionate about what I love to do. And I think putting those type of people together will strengthen them so much, just because then there's that friendly competition level, and I really believe that that helps people learn so much more than if they're trying to do it just by themselves.
So what's the difference between just like a tutorial and the workshop?
The main difference is you'll get a lot of feedback. There'll be weekly assignments that I expect you guys to do, and then I'll review them, and then I'll give critiques on what I would do next time better or what you're doing right, and then kind of
So it's more like one-on-one.
Yeah, but I also want it to feel like a classroom experience where the students will also be able to interact with each other. So probably these live streams, unfortunately, will be cut for those 8 weeks, unless if someone else kind of runs them for that time. And then during this time period, I would be live streaming with my students and helping them out that way.
How would you make something look furry when coloring?
I would probably isolate different patches of fur, but oftentimes I see the best way to do it is finding a brush that can recreate the look that you're going for. Because oftentimes you might be spent over detailing something that could have been done really, really simply with just a brush. Really quick, I'm just copying and pasting that horn layer. I'm using my warp tool to kind of fit it in to that original line art on that side. Because if you can save time with something as simple as this, why wouldn't you? There we go. So I definitely think the horns could still use something to give them that effect, but for now, that's my best attempt at it before I move on. And this is my first attempt at doing it. And they say that every time you recreate something, you'll get better every single time. So I'm sure if I tried doing the horns again, I would do it better the second time. Okay. Now let's start doing button. I think that's something that has been blank. So rather than just doing like a full button base like this, which I guess I could do, maybe just a slight one just to distinguish it from the fur. But for the most part, I like having the same base color all around because then that color will be integrated everywhere, no matter what part of the subject matter you're working on. Actually, I do not even have a button reference in front of me. So something like this, I can kind of guess like what a button looks like. So right now I'm kind of pulling from my mind rather than using an actual reference. And sometimes it may come out all right, but this is a good example of if you can use reference to better your work, why wouldn't you? So I think something like that, it's going to be my best shot at it. Now this button over here is more in shadow. So this one I can actually leave more of that shadow color. But like I said before, I'm not going to add more shadow to it. I'm just going to leave it kind of as that base orange color that we have over here. Something like this color. Do we have another one?
Yeah, our next comment is, do you think it is possible to learn to draw in different styles? All my drawings are very realistic, and although I'd love to, I feel very uncomfortable when I try to stylize my drawings, and I can't do it well.
I think if you're comfortable doing realism, it's easier to do other styles. And I know that may just sound biased since I feel like I like doing realism more, but like for me, if I wanted to do something that was animated looking, while it may take a few tries, that background knowledge of lighting and color and just things like that will come into play when working in an animation realm. But I know kind of what you're talking about. I guess, how do you feel about this?
I would say because I kind of started with a realistic background and like I'm trying to get into my own style, I would just say experiment and do like studies of other people's work, like see how other people do it. That's not like harmful or like cheating or anything. Like if you have a favorite artist that does like anime style or just like more Disney style, like just look, like you just have to observe like what they're doing and what choices they're making. That doesn't mean like go ahead and just like copy it, but just that's how you learn.
Fully agree. And now for here, the stitch color of the actual buttons, I'm just going to make darker just because that contrast, you can see what it looks like on and off, just gives it a little more to the button itself. And now let's go ahead and get to this underside here. I'm going to make another new layer. So that would be the button layer, I guess. So now I'm going to be pulling, so let's see, the colors that I have in my canvas I often try to work within. So this highlight color of the button, I'm I'm going to pull down and let's see what that looks like. Oops. Phone call, of course, during my stream. Seems like I never get calls or texts unless if I'm doing something important.
Live.
Yeah.
Too. Somebody asked, will you ever make a figure drawing tutorial? Or gesture tutorial?
Yes, I feel like I have one with my red tutorial. I guess it's more, not so much gesture.
Or like a well, you've done like sheets of anatomy, I think, right?
Yeah. I think I do need to do another full-blown one where it's like, what's a good exercise to do? Just warm up with like 20 quick gestures. Because I think it's good for you guys to realize that gestures aren't supposed to be something that you're showing off or something that you want to post to DeviantArt. It's something that literally gets your hand warmed up for the day and gets you back into that like thinking, drawing mode. So I think it would be good if I can just show you like in 5 to 10 minutes, I can just pump out 20 gesture drawings that I'm still somewhat proud of, but I'm not like trying to polish them or detail them by any means.
What about like realistic proportions?
You know, in learning realistic proportions, I personally believe that you really have to spend time with that, and you really have to be able to analyze your photos. So I don't think gestures would be the best thing for learning realism. I think it's good if you can like have a loose line and shape and try to figure out your proportions that way. Like even figuring out, like when I do my proportions, I always start off with like the backbone, and then the 2 hip bones, and then kind of work from there. And I build my body essentially, and then from there I try to like squiggle my different anatomy proportions and gestures and my forms. So finding which process works for you, like this is my process, but this is not how like every artist does it, not even close. Like everyone has their own way of doing it. So I think figuring that out is more important than focusing on like, well, it's tough because now I think about it, like even, you know what, just take a life drawing class. That is the best way to really.
I mean, maybe you could do like dedicate like a feature stream to it. I don't know exactly how that would work.
Because I did it once and it was kind of fun. Where like I had one of those websites where it's like every 30 seconds. Yeah, so that was kind of fun. But I think it would be better if I had like that one I might do for the class. So for the workshop, I might do that with the class and have not just me live stream it, but everyone in the class stream it as well. So now under this guy's chin, oops, I'm going to grab what is considered to be my shadow color of this color and work it around.
Do you have any suggestions on how to come up with new concepts?
Life, probably. So playing movies, or watching movies, playing video games, not...
Visual library, I think.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, I feel like every time it always comes back to that, is just building your personal library. But something that I've kind of realized recently is like your personal style will come a lot from what interests you. So like things that interest me, I like laugh at, like I like things like that. So some of my influences might be like a Rihanna music video, where I don't think a lot of other concept artists would see that at all, and that would not be in their visual library. So what makes you unique as an artist will come through in your style. You don't have to force it. It'll kind of just come naturally. So a lot of the times I would say just trust yourself. And now as I do that, I kind of start working everywhere. So yeah, so then that is kind of the bottom edge of my dragon plush here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this color right here. I'm going to pull it onto the inside of the arms and what will be on the belly as well. So I'm going to do this on a new layer. So first, I'm going to lay out my shadow color. So this slight brown, and then I'm going to work up my lighting values on top of it. something like that. And now I'm going to just pull from the color that I had on the face itself. And now I'm going to kind of follow that shadow line that I created with the arm. So, see, I forgot a proportion, little section right there. So now I'm grabbing that highlight color, and now let's work with the line that I've kind of created here and work around it. And then I'm thinking, okay, casting a shadow. I actually do this on a new layer so I can use.
Kirsty comments, I always have a rough kind of coloring, like Van Gogh. How can I practice smoothing out my coloring technique?
A lot of that kind of depends on the brush you're using. Where I know for a long while I was solely using the circle hard edge brush, and I was very dedicated to it. Where I was like, I'm not going to be using any other brush besides this brush. But a lot of the times it would take me like a minute to shade something that would literally take like 5 seconds to just switch to a soft edge brush, make it look a little more smoothed out, and then go back to my circle brush to detail it. Where I think using a variety of brushes will help you, because something like this, I can use one brush and it'll have that effect everywhere because I'm not worrying about how smooth it looks. So a lot of the times it's how much pressure you're applying to whatever brush you have as well.
Just making, like, if you're shading something, making the layers like really gradual.
Oh yeah, that would be, is try working dark to light. Now, not every artist does this. This is something that I always do. But I always find that having that base color to build your light values on top of really helps visually, or at least it helps me. So maybe that will you as well.
I think it helps like bring the whole piece together too.
Yeah. Because then there's that consistency of a color throughout. Like working on this dark, burnt red color, it's kind of brought it all together, except for the horns. The horns are kind of doing their own thing right now.
Do you have a list of keyboard shortcuts?
Yes. So we actually have a tip tutorial on that, and you can find that on the site, and it's a free tutorial. But pretty much what I recommend is kind of figuring out what tools you use the most and then setting those as your keyboard shortcuts. Like for me, I don't use B as my brush tool or E as my eraser. I use Z and X because I like to keep my left hand in the bottom left corner of my keyboard, but I don't have to really move it at all. And the only times I have to move it is if I have to do liquify. So even my flip canvas horizontal is Command Q. Or obviously Control Z is a big one for me, Option Command Z, but you'll kind of be able to figure out what tools you use the most. So for me, those are the tools I use the most, so those are the ones I put closest to my left hand for easy access.
Is it okay for concept artists to draw on top of photos if they need to get a super realistic look that they can't achieve themselves and save time?
So we did a live stream on this a couple weeks back, I believe, and the way that I always see working on top of photos is, one, if you can use your own photos, that's the best case scenario. Two, if you alter it enough where if you yourself feel like you did, well, that's tough because a lot of the time it's a personal call. But I would say do your best to not work on top of photos that aren't yours. But if you absolutely have to save time, then really alter it enough to where you feel comfortable in saying, yeah, this is my own illustration. But that's definitely a tricky road where there is no fine line. It's a very gray area, so I can't give you a definitive answer on that.
That's what like matte painting is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, getting the concept down, but not like worrying about the illustration part. Just make sure that like you're not trying to deceive people with that, I guess, because people get really, I find online that they get really mad when they like if you are saying that you drew everything, obviously, and then like you actually used a bunch of photos.
Oh, that would be, I guess, the best thing is definitely reference what you use.
So if you just want to like really flesh out a concept really fast, like just make sure like you cite your sources and like you know, do it the proper way.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes being tricked into thinking that you have skills, or like someone has skills that they don't.
Okay, so I feel pretty good about this. Even when I hide the line art,
Yeah.
I like what we have so far. But I think just for this live stream, since I only have about 15 minutes left.
Line art.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Definitely got an interesting look. I guess if I wanted to work without the line art, I could. I would just have to clean up some areas, just a tad.
The edges.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Because that's oftentimes with, like, people always ask me, how do I work on top of my line art? Oftentimes, I just hide the line art, where then I'll work without it, or I'll turn the layer's opacity really far down and then work on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's someone like me where I don't like having line art be seen. But I know a lot of artists work with line art, so I think that's a whole nother realm of what techniques you can use to go about that way. Actually, yeah, now I'm starting to like this as well. And this is a good example of where I try to avoid using rim lights more nowadays. But like, let's say I really wanted to edge out this character. A quick rim light will give you that definitive edge and will separate your subject matter from the background. And oftentimes, it's just a single line or a stroke. That's all you need.
Or you could change the background.
That's true. Like, even right now, I want to edge out the character from the background. Maybe I don't mind the little highlight.
No, it works here, I think. It all depends on the piece.
Yeah, that's true. But I think oftentimes rim lights get a bad name because of how overused they are, and oftentimes inaccurately.
Like with the horns, I think that gave it like the extra
right there
oomph of like shininess.
Yeah, so if you see before and after, yeah, it definitely adds something to it that wasn't there before. And this is a good example of where I'm going to use more of a pure white. Since that horns have that foil reflective surface, I should probably enhance the lighting situation going on here. I don't know. Maybe I'll go around first and then see if I like it. And even with the other side, I'd probably do a more subtle one. Alright, this is what I need to erase some of that background color we got going on there. So here, I'm going to pull up the liner again, and I'm going to use my... I could either use an eraser tool and go back to the original layer. A lot of the times I like creating a new layer and edging it out myself. Sometimes I like the extra left behind brush strokes that this will often create.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very similar to this soft edge brush tutorial that we have, where once you do this part, it'll really separate the character from the background, and you could almost be close to done after this step. Where from here on out, it's kind of doing refining and detailing. Where I probably should have done a base color for the toe and fingernails, but those are pretty quick, and those we can add on pretty easily.
You got the head horns too.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm not positive what I want to do for the wing. I might just make it like a dark felt. Oops. So then once you edge it out, you can kind of fill in the rest of the color. And if you edge it out with like a solid brush, you could almost even use your paint bucket tool. But like I said, since I like having some of those leftover strokes.
More painterly.
Yeah. Then once we do this, and then I hide the line art layer, you'll really start to see the character come alive. I guess while I'm kind of doing this, since I don't have questions at the moment, we have an interview that comes out right after this live stream, and it's with Paul Kwan, but most people know him as Zeronis. And he's an artist that works at Riot Games, and he's one of my favorite style artists. And we had the pleasure of interviewing him, and he did a really good in-depth look at the questions, and I really think he was one of those artists that you need to read their interview just to hear their point of view about working in the industry, what it was like kind of getting through art school, and also what they struggled with learning digital art themselves. So that will be available as soon as this is over. So you can see as I hide the line art, definitely will have areas like this that need cleanup. But you can kind of see that we have something more to work with. Unless if you're a fan of the line art, then you can keep it. But for me, since I don't really like working with line art, I would probably work from here on out without it. So I'm going to do my best for this last, let's say, I'll work another 10 minutes. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of detail this a little bit as well, too. So let's go zooming in on this forehead right here. So this right here, this is kind of what I was trying to talk about earlier with that contrast, where you kind of create the ridge. And that ridge is what will give it that sense of value and contrast.
The edges being pushed up against each other.
Yeah.
With like...
This is probably one of the biggest mistakes early artists do, is that they don't do this, where they soften, like they think, oh, if there's a crevice, the area down here has to be more in shadow. But you really have to be thinking about the light source and how it would be affecting the area that you're working on itself.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, where's that initial blue color? No, that's too intense. Yeah, so I'm going to be working with this lighter color. And then like these horn, or whatever we want to call these things, these little flappers.
When would you use rim lights?
I would say if I was trying to do a concept quickly, where sometimes you just need to showcase the subject matter that you're working on and have to edge them off from the subject or from the background. So if I'm doing client work, I'll use rim lights, or if there's a really intense backlit area for some reason, then I would use them. But for the most part, I try to stay away from using them, to be honest.
What is more valuable and attractive to future employers / clients? Having various styles or a more concentrated body of work?
Oof.
Personally, I think if you can, like, various styles are good. It shows that like you're well-rounded. But if, like they say also, like a portfolio is only as strong as like its weakest piece. So if you're not particularly good at like landscapes, don't include like your landscape drawings.
Very true.
And if you're really strong at like portraits or something, then just do those. I like that a lot.
So normally I have a stitch brush. I don't have it in my brushes right now. I'm not sure why, but you can download a stitch brush that will follow your line, and it would be much easier than you just saw me individually draw each stitch. Sometimes it gives it that hand-drawn effect that I kind of like. It's not too daunting of a task. But I guess also to answer that question, I remember someone I went to school with, his name was Paul Hoffner, and he works at Riot Games now, but I remember him when he was building his portfolio, he said it was hard for him to decide if he wanted to do exactly what you're asking, because then he's either a jack of all trades but a master of none, and I think this is something that really hindered him, where he finally decided, no, I'm a character artist, this is what I want to do, and then he finally ended up making his portfolio more character-driven, and eventually he got a job at Riot. So I think having that concentrated look of like, this is what I'm good at, this is what I like to do, it gives the employers a sense of, okay, this is what he's really good at, I know that it, and he enjoys it. So let's hire him for this. Where sometimes if you showcase a diverse portfolio, someone might hire you because they really liked your landscape that you included in there, but let's say you hate doing landscapes and you threw it in there just because you wanted to be diverse, well, then you kind of are stuck, because now that employer thinks you're good at landscapes because you included it in your portfolio, and you won't enjoy your job, and that will just create a whole mess of other problems. I really like how this is looking now.
Yeah. Coming together. Didn't you do a tutorial or course for us?
Yeah, so if you want to check out, Paul's done one on environments and another, I want to say it was just a time lapse, but that I can link on to you guys after this live stream. This is another thing that bothers me about Google Hangouts, is I'm not allowed to really post anything. I can look at your guys' questions, but I can't really post a question myself. You gotta, yeah. So now for this button here, let's imagine that it was really pushed into the fabric around it, because the stitching is really pulling it inside of it. It would probably create a little bump around it, just of the fabric folding. I'm going to do my best to kind of recreate that. I don't want to overdo it. Sometimes you don't want to oversell your point. Sometimes if it's very subtle, it'll get the point across. And don't feel frustrated if you're often second guessing yourself, because that means your mind's always constantly trying to think of the best way to go about doing something. But if you're having like trouble, like being like, oh, I don't know if I like that, I like it, but I kind of don't like it, sometimes just move to a different section of your piece and come back to it later. Like even with me right now, I'm not sure how I feel about this little wrinkle, so I'm going to move on and come back to it.
It feels like it almost like the button is in the fabric, not like on top of it, that way.
What do you mean?
Like, it feels like the stitching is around the button, not like under the button.
Oh, maybe. Gotcha. Yeah. I think that's might be what bothers me a little bit. But oftentimes I'll be like, okay, I'm going to put that on the back burner. I'll come back to it later with a fresh pair of eyes. So like on this eye, I might give it some bounce lighting from that floor, which in this case is this gray background color that we're using. So this is the type of rim lighting I like, where it's not like an intense light per se, but it's more of a bounce lit rim light.
Yeah.
Where I feel like the subtle rim lights are the ones I do recommend adding, because the ones that are very harsh sometimes aren't, well, in my opinion, they're not quite as nice looking. It looks like you're trying to just separate it from the background. So sometimes I think it can actually cheapen your work depending on how it's handled. Not to say that it's always like that, but a lot of the times it's how I feel when I see a really intense rim light. So I would work with more subtle rim lighting than anything. And if you can, I've always noticed that cooler rim lights seem to work better than warmer rim lights. So just give it a test and work with like pulling grays in as your rim light, like an intense saturated blue. Sometimes the most neutral gray will give you the exact kind of look that you're going for. Oops. So even like on the hands here, do a subtle little bounce light and just kind of shade it in.
Is the girl with you an artist too, and what's her name?
This is Deandra Pop. She's been doing the book reviews with us. I guess do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Oh, you got it.
But the whole thing with Deandra is she went to art school and kind of pulled out, realizing that it's not so much. Well, you tell the story more.
I tried to go with like a traditional school setting. I went to like a university for I went to community college to learn like my foundations, and then I went to an actual art school, and I found that I wasn't really enjoying it or like learning things that I wanted to, and there's like a lot of unnecessary stuff. It's too expensive for me not getting what I want out of it. So I decided it wasn't worth the money, and I could spend it in like better ways. The thing with like the digital art industry is there's so much stuff online that like is a good substitute for, you know, like the traditional way of doing things like going to college. So I'm taking like classes online. I'm like looking at tutorials, and like that's enough for me to like keep learning. And it's such like a cheaper alternative that's just as good. Um, Even like the workshop that Tim is doing, like that's something I would rather like invest in. Not even because I know Tim, but just like that type of setting that you can like you have an instructor online, but like you pick what type of class you want to take. Like, okay, I want to learn, beginner like Photoshop tools or something, or I want to learn the art of color and light. You can pick like your agenda and more personalized. So anyway, I am also an artist in progress, I guess I would say, but uh, yeah, I helped him out with things on his site as like an assistant, like with the streams, and I do the book reviews for now. And we'll see where that goes. Do you use a smudge tool for any effects or something?
Every now and then I will, but I think for this guy, like if I really wanted to get a depth of field, I could, but I think I'm going to stay away from doing any blur tool, because oftentimes that'll give it a lack of depth, the look of unfocused or blurry, literally what the blur tool is supposed to be, but since I'm not really going for that effect on this, I'm not going to be using it. And that's another tool that I think a lot of people sneer at, but if used accurately, it can actually be used quite effectively. Like I know even I'll kind of knock on like the dodge and burn tool, but there are artists out there that really do use it effectively, and I think it's just one of those tools that it's used improperly so much that that's why I recommend people staying away from it. But if you use any tool correctly, there's no reason that you shouldn't be using it if you enjoy that tool. Alright, I think I'm clearing near the end of where I want to cut this one off. So if you guys have any last minute questions, we'll see if we can scroll through all of them, because that's another disadvantage of Google Hangout. So like even on the stitching on the nose here, if I just add subtle little highlights around it to really indicate that the stitching is kind of pushed in. So let me zoom in. So let's say there's a stitch here and it goes till about here. I'm going to grab that color that's used in the nose, make it lighter in value. Actually, I could probably give this cheek a little more oomph. But for time purposes, let's say that the lighting's coming from overhead, so then I would probably push this out more.
Exactly? Is it like a stitch?
I don't know.
Or...
Oh, you mean like I was like, I don't know what this hot dog bun on the cheek is supposed to be, but
no, the nostril.
Yeah, so the nostril is just a stitch. I guess I could better illustrate that if I highlighted it just a tad more. Because oftentimes with stitches that are seen on the outside of stuffed animals, you don't really see the holes. Like with leather and stuff where it's very tight, you can kind of see, like I would probably create a hole right here if we were doing more like leather working. But since we're working with fabric, I like to keep it something more like this, where it's more surface. And then oftentimes what will help is just adding a slight highlight to the stitch, which will round it out. And then the shadow area will be more on the top. Oop. So even though I'm not creating a hole, I'm still trying to create that effect that it's pushed in. So you can see the difference there. And that one's really popped out, I think, because I was trying to emphasize it, but I would probably work a tad more subtle on that. And then lastly, before I cut the stream off, I'm breaking my own rule that I'm setting right here, where the line between the cheek and the red, where the red begins, it should be more of a contrast. Or maybe the area under the button itself would be more cast shadowed, but overall, the lighting needs to stay consistent.
Did you go to art school?
I did. So I went to the Art Institute of Schaumburg. But what's funny is my background is in 3D design. So I'm actually a 3D artist, and that's what I graduated with. But in school, I kind of knew that that's not what I wanted to do. So in my spare time, I would just learn Photoshop to the best of my ability. And since there were other kids that kind of went to the school not wanting to be a 3D artist, but more of a concept artist, we all kind of banded together and learned Photoshop in our own ways, and we would have like this unspoken competition between all of us. I think that's what really helped me, and I think that's why I want to do this workshop that feels where you're getting that same experience, because I really do believe that that competition, even, and it's a healthy competition, so it's not like we're trying to dog on each other here. It's supposed to be helpful, and that's what I think really helps people learn. So I guess you could say my school didn't actually teach me how to draw in Photoshop, but it gave me the resources in terms of the people that I met that really helped me along. Yeah, something like that. So you can see if I hide that layer on and off, there it gives much more of a difference. Like I can even tell, oops.
It gives it more shape.
Exactly, where the form was not there before. So I could probably go through the entire piece and do that everywhere, but I think just for time purposes, I'm going to cut this live stream right now. But I want to thank you guys all for coming to this. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's Central Time in the States, and -5 GMT outside of it. And if you guys have any suggestions for next week, leave them in the comment section on the image that I'll post on our Facebook page. And especially if you're interested in the workshop, let me know that as well. But go check out the interview with Zeronis. I will post the tutorial from Paul. And lastly, we're going to go through any more questions that you guys have.
Somebody asked what online art school I would recommend. Well, obviously, Concept Cookie is a great, actually, resource. I learned a lot from Tim. I'm not just trying to butter him up or anything, but
Thank you.
I did he actually inspired me to go like further into digital art and or at a quicker pace. I'm currently taking a CGMA course. They have a lot of classes that might interest you. A lot of artists I follow actually are coming up with like new like courses, or I guess would say. So just keep like an eye out. I guess like I know Anthony Jones has a few like tutorials going up for sale. They're really cheap, like $5. I'm not trying to like advertise here, but just what I personally would recommend. Just check out the artists that you follow. I'm sure like they'll offer, most artists like offer something like that, like a tutorial here and there besides like the official classes. Anyway.
Oh, okay. So someone's saying, is art school stupid/unnecessary? I found a super cool international art school in Denmark, but I keep hearing from various artists that went to school that it is a waste of time and money. And while I don't want to rip on art schools, I do feel like they are overpriced for the amount of quality you are getting out of them. But at the same time, they do offer the experience of meeting other artists, and sometimes those will be the connections that actually do land you jobs in the future. So while I'm not going to knock on art schools, I will say if you want to learn digital art, you can do it all online.
It depends what kind of art school, but if you're going for like something like this industry that's newer but like rising quickly, a lot of artists, or not artists, a lot of art schools like aren't keeping up with that, and they seem like a little outdated with like their curriculums and things. That's why I left that one school in the first place. They had me doing like a lot of traditional, which is not bad, like I like traditional, but they didn't offer anything besides that, which is what I wanted.
Okay, let's see here.
Somebody suggested next week maybe you can do a tutorial on fur or feathers.
I could do my best. I will say I don't feel like I'm the most skilled. I did do feathers with Piero in the whole Piero course, but I think to do it really accurately, it really does come to the brush and the way that you use it. So I mean, if I practice maybe before next week, I'll do a live stream on that. But I definitely think stuff like that is catered toward custom brushes.
Are you adding another seam?
Yeah. So right now I'm kind of going through and adding seams everywhere.
On top of the seam you already have?
I guess there is one here. That's right.
I guess, I don't know, maybe it could work. Like that one looks like it makes sense. So it's probably fine.
Anyways, okay. I just saw one more come in.
Yeah, would you recommend doing a postgraduate instead?
Would I recommend doing a postgraduate?
Yeah, like getting a master's.
No.
I think...
Unless you want to teach.
The only reason to go to art school, personally, I would say, is if it's for like a decent price. But most are overpriced, and like as an artist, like we don't often start out with like the highest salaries. So like trying to like I hear a lot of people like just crying over like how much debt they're in after graduating, and they didn't even like get the job that they wanted.
Unfortunately.
Or like it takes a while to get the one you want, you know. You don't always get it right off the bat. So it's up to you, you know. Depends on your financial situation, where exactly you want to go with your art, but definitely do the research. Don't just like jump into going to art school, because there are like alternatives.
Okay, so I think we're going to cut it off. If you guys have any other questions, just send them to me, or I'll even leave them on any of our social media pages and we'll get back to you. But I want to thank you guys all for coming again, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.